But hit record.
There's my present button. Hello and welcome to Decolonizing Disability, a call to settler action. Thank you to everyone for joining CILT at our annual event marking Truth and Reconciliation Day. I'll be your host and moderator this afternoon. My name is Dev and I use they, them pronouns. For a visual description, I'm a light to medium brown-skinned transmasculine person of Indo-Caribbean descent in their 30s. I've bleached hair with dark roots and it's pinned back. I have 2 nose piercings and I'm wearing red glasses and a navy blue shirt with constellation patterns on it. And before we begin, we will start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are all joining virtually, so maybe on different treaty lands, and that CILT is located in Toronto, the territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nations, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat peoples. We recognize the harmful impacts of the historical genocide, ongoing colonization, and racism committed against Indigenous people, and that those of us who are settlers owe a debt of gratitude to Indigenous people for the opportunity to live, play, and work on this land. We stand in solidarity with generations of Indigenous people and commit to advancing reconciliation, action on the 94 calls to action, and the creation of a more equitable, just, and inclusive Ontario for all, especially for those who endure multiple intersecting forms of oppression, particularly Indigenous, Black, and other racialized people with disabilities. This land is also part of the Dish with One Spoon territory, a treaty between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Anishinaabe, and allied nations, to peaceably share and care for this land. All those who come to live and work here are responsible for honoring this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. I notice some and Kim, if you're able to respond to some folks in the Q&A.
I've just typed in a note. I'll do it again.
Thank you. I also want to share some stats from the Native Women's Association of Canada. It is estimated that more than 420,000 or 30% of Indigenous people in Canada live with a disability or functional limitation, and 1 in 8 Indigenous children are disabled, which is double the rate of non-Indigenous children. I'd also like to include this African ancestral acknowledgement from the Tamarack Institute. We acknowledge those who came here as settlers, as migrants either in this generation or in the generations past, and those of us who came involuntarily, particularly those brought to these lands as a result of the transatlantic slave trade and enslavement. We pay tribute to the ancestors of African origin and descent, and thank them for their contributions towards transforming systems in ways that promote everyone's sense of belonging and safety. So thanks again for joining us today. This webinar is meant to mark Truth and Reconciliation Day, a day for settlers to actively participate in learning about the legacy of the residential school system and its ongoing impacts on Indigenous communities. This is an annual event that CILT participates in every year. We're going to start off today with our housekeeping, including some session guidelines on how to participate today. As I finish that, I'll be introducing our executive director to say a short welcome. Then David, our senior manager of independent living programs, will present a dedication to Elder Wanda Whitebird and the work that she's done with CILT on our decolonizing journey. We will also share how we've used her teachings in our work moving forward. Then we'll take a short break before we return for a panel discussion with two Indigenous artists and activists. For the last half hour of our webinar, we will open up the panel for a Q&A where you will get to ask your own questions. We understand that not everyone may be able to stay until the end of the Q&A, so we will include our wrap-up information before we move into the Q&A, but we do encourage you to stay for it. Now on to our housekeeping. We apologize for some issues with our ASL. We have been unable to get in contact with our interpreters. We do have CART captioning provided, and our note taker is Mint Mokand. And there's a link in the chat to view those notes. If you do not see a link in the chat, just let us know and we will drop the link again. Where's my mouse? For privacy and time management, everyone will be muted and no video except for the hosts until questions and answer section. We will be recording the Zoom webinar, but we'll stop recording at the question and answer section. Messages in the chat and Q&A will only go to the host and co-host to accommodate people who use screen readers. Please send your chat questions or comments to Kim Atlert. She will be moderating chat questions during Q&A. We will be taking both spoken and chat questions. During the Q&A, we will give additional information regarding chat functions. Given our conversation's topic, we will share a content warning here. For anyone who feels triggered in any way, please feel free to step away for self-care. And if you wish for any peer support, please contact Joella Knott and she will offer assistance. You can reach her by phone at 416-599-2458 at extension 245. Or you can email Joella at joellaknott, that's joella.CONNAUGHT@cilt.ca. We plan to co-create an anti-oppressive space where everyone is treated respectfully. While we understand that everyone may be starting at different places of learning, we may remove people from the room who display overt acts of discrimination, including racism, xenophobia, homophobia, transphobia, or sexism. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with CILT, CILT is rooted in the Nothing About Us Without Us disability rights movement. We are a community-based resource center run by people with disabilities for people with disabilities. We work towards building a society where people with disabilities access social and economic equity, justice, and full societal inclusion. CILT programs include information and referral / volunteer programs, peer support and parenting with a disability network, independent living skills training, the Attendance Service Application Center, the Direct Funding Program, the IDEA Project, and the GTA Disability Coalition. Now I'd like to welcome Wendy Porch, she, her, the Executive Director of CILT, to say a few words before we begin. I will stop sharing so you can.
Thank you, Dev. Thank you, Dev. And my thanks to everybody for joining us today for Decolonizing Disability, a call to settler action on this Truth and Reconciliation Day. I want to keep my welcome quite short because I think that we have more opportunity to learn today by listening than by speaking. And so I just want to say at CILT, we believe that independent living means justice, respect, and inclusion. And on this Truth and Reconciliation Day, we can honor these principles primarily by listening, learning, and committing to action. And Truth and Reconciliation asks us not only to remember, but to commit to change. And so today, we join in the spirit of pausing, reflecting, and recommitting ourselves to building a more just future together. So thank you everybody for being here. Thank you very much to our speakers. Deeply, deeply grateful for you to be spending part of this day, which is an incredibly important day for your community with us. Thank you for that. Thanks, Deb.
Thank you for that, Wendy. I will now pass it off to David Myers, our Senior Manager of Independent Living Program.
Thanks, Deb. Hi, everyone. My name is David Myers. I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a Black, disabled man and a longtime settler in Toronto. I'm light-skinned with very short salt and pepper hair, and I'm wearing eyeglasses and a gray button-down shirt. I'm truly honored to be marking Truth and Reconciliation Week with all of you present and sharing a few reflections on CILT's decolonizing work as a disability rights and an independent living center. Now, we at CILT acknowledge that we have much decolonizing work yet ahead of us, as does the disability sector and the nonprofit sector more broadly that we're a part of. And today, we all know is dedicated to settlers and settler organizations and institutions recommitting to do our own truth and reconciliation making work to advance action, particularly on the 94 calls to action, but intentionally and in genuine allyship with Indigenous people. And while almost all of us who are settlers live and participate in mostly colonial design and operating structures, our obligations as settlers are to acknowledge and disrupt, and even in some cases dismantle, the ongoing oppression and erasure and even disablement of Indigenous disabled people. Slide 9. Indigenous peoples experience interlocking forms of systemic oppression and discrimination in Canada. They endure disproportionately high rates of homelessness, making up at least 35% of the homeless population by government estimates, despite being only 5% of the general population. And our sector, therefore, has a duty to collectively decolonize our work and take steps to move our work forward rather than settle for performative checkbox types of actions. What does that and can that mean? What can meaningful action look like? And we look forward to exploring that in the conversation that Deb's going to moderate with our two guests. A new slide, please. For over 3 years, CILT has worked with the kind, generous guidance of Elder Wanda Whitebird. We'll be sharing highlights of our work with her over a 4 to 5 year period up to her death last November 14. To honor Wanda's legacy. And we'll share some audio and photo images, though none will depict images of Wanda. We've been advised to honor her family's wishes that no images or video of Wanda be publicly shown before the 1 year anniversary of her death. It's a common practice among some Indigenous communities, And so we'll be respecting that custom today, for sure. Next slide, please. Thanks. Ella was a member of the Mi'kmaq First Nations in Nova Scotia and of the Bear Clan. And after moving to Ontario in 1986, she made a tremendous impact doing harm reduction work in prisons, Indigenous organizations like Anishinaabe Health, and also did a lot of work with marginalized communities in partnership with many settler organizations. So her impact went beyond just Indigenous communities. And our first contact with her came in 2021. We were approached by her and Audrey Huntley, both leaders in the Indigenous organization called No More Silence, with a request to partner on a new project called Disability Justice through Indigenous Ceremonies. Now, No More Silence have been active in advocating for justice for missing, murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirited people for close to 20 years, and had worked in prison justice and land defense as well. And the project was funded by the City of Toronto, and it addressed ableism in Indigenous ceremonial spaces and aimed to influence greater access to Indigenous people with accessibility needs. And we have an audio to play of Wanda speaking about this. Are we able to play that? The next slide, please. Go down one more slide. I'm sorry. There's an audio recording there. One slide up at the top of that page. Are you able to play that? Hit that link, please. Thank you.
I'm just having some issues getting it to open.
Open. It's a bit slow.
Oh. You might need to, it's saying I don't have access, which I thought I did when I checked it. Our apologies. Give us one moment as we figure out a few technical difficulties. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and see if I can get this to work.
I have had the most amazing opportunity to talk to individuals in our community who are differently abled than others. Some have said it's the first time someone has asked them that question. What is or how can you participate in ceremony? What is it that we need to change? And there are so many things that we need to change and learn, so that everybody in our community has an opportunity to access our ceremonies, our teachings, and our community events. It's not enough just to have an automatic door. There are so many places that the wheelchairs won't fit, that the walkers they use, that they can't get them through the doors, and they're made to leave them outside and continue to walk a distance without them. Those who have mental health issues or may be louder than others are asked not to attend because we're not a trauma-informed community and we're not providing trauma informed care in a traditional way for everybody that needs access to that. So many want to be there. So many want to be a part of this community, and yet they don't leave home because they can't get through our doors.
Thank you so much, Dev, for sharing that. Glad you got it to work. So this was an example of the experiences Wanda and No More Silence got from doing focus groups with a range of Indigenous folks with disabilities in phase 1 of the project. So they did key informant interviews and also focus groups with Indigenous people with different disabilities, you know, episodic, physical, invisible disabilities, mental health disabilities, etc. And you know, during the experience, Wanda's eyes really opened to just the impact of lack of access to ceremony that a lot of folks were experiencing. And so she speaks to that she shared many stories that she found heartbreaking and eye-opening, and resolved to make it a mission from then on to build support for Indigenous orgs and groups to include folks with access barriers in their ceremonies as full respected participants. And there's one more video that I'm going to ask Dev to share. When she talks a bit more about her mission in relation to that. And that's on slide 14. And it's at the top.
Right, you just need to give me access.
How would I do that, Dev? Sorry, give you access in what way?
Once again, we apologize for the technical difficulties. I thought I had access to these links in a previous, when we previously were sent these links, but
Certainly, if you can, I'll just read out the transcript of it, which I have in front of me. That's the second option. Just let me know.
have you received an email requesting access?
Not yet. Why don't I just read the transcript? I'll read the transcript so we can move forward with the presentation. And Wanda says, we need to remember that the mental health of everyone we work with. We need to look at trauma-informed care. We might need to speak slower. We might not have to speak so loud. For many people come to us with mental health challenges. They're distraught. They're carrying unbearable grief. It manifests within a physical sense, but in reality, it's a spiritual and emotional issue that they might need to share. And we need to be more informed on what people need. And maybe the best step is to ask them what they need, because for sure, they know. Don't let them say it sounds ridiculous, that you can't meet what they need. We can't do that. We have to be able to get them into places in our organizations. Most importantly, into our ceremonies. Because we know in our hearts that the happiest place to be is in ceremony. Let's do it together. Let your voices echo to the generations from today through to the next generation. Because that's what our voices do. Let's listen and understand and give thanks for the voices of the people who have the courage to share. Thank you. Let's do it. I know we can. All my relations. Let me say that again. All my relations. And we mean everyone. So that was another a video we played audio from that came out of those focus group and interview meetings Wanda had, and they're on No More Silence's website. And we'll share the link to that when we send you our resources, but you can go there and see videos of those interviews, and also of some photos of a video from the Sweat Lodge, which was built as the last part of that project that CILT did with No More Silence. The next slide, please. Great. So No More Silence, in the third part of the project, was the outcome of building an accessible sweat lodge in Toronto. It was a very exciting project. We were thrilled to be part of it because there was no such sweat lodge in our city. And Wanda was thrilled about the idea of doing this, particularly after those interviews. And so plans were made by the city of Toronto to try and build one in a park in Scarborough. It would have been not a bricks and mortar kind of sweat lodge, but one that was structured with wood and could be reinforced every season. That did not work out, unfortunately. The city would not trustee that project, citing liability and insurance issues. And CILT's insurance could not do that either. And so after a short time, Wanda and Audrey decided to build a sweat lodge on Six Nations Reserve in Brantford. And as some of you know, there's a very large reserve in Brantford. Wanda and No More Silence had connections there. So they arranged to begin building in 2023 on a site. And by the summer of 2024, had pretty much built the sweat lodge with an accessible entrance, a ramp, and enough space within the sweat lodge that people who had mobility devices could enter and sit in their device and enjoy a sweat. And in one of her audio recordings, she says, "I built a sweat and I'm now able to go into that sweat and create a healing space for Indigenous folks that have been turned away from many Indigenous spaces because of no access. No one was turned away from my sweats, including transgendered and non-binary folks. No one should be turned away." New paragraph. New slide. That's an example of the Hummingbirds Sweat Lodge in progress. It was built with a wooden ramp to go through those pretty wide doors. It's a beautiful picture of a hummingbird, as you see there. It's for those who are low vision or blind. It's the picture is a picture of a wooden structure, a one-story a structure like a like a small house with a large door on the side facing the camera, and a beautiful hummingbird, photo of a painting of a hummingbird is painted across the door. And then there is what looks like it will be a ramp leaning up against the side of the structure. And so that's on the site. I saw a video of Wanda wheeling into the lodge when it was completed. Can't show you that because of the restriction on showing any video of her, but she gave it a test, a christening, as you would say, and it was quite a joyous event with lots of cheer and celebration. Next slide, please. There's some more photos. This photo is a photo from a height of Six Nations, a part of Six Nations, and in the foreground, there's trees, a bunch of trees, and in the background, around the middle, is what you can see, if you're able to see, is a picture of the sweat lodge in a clearing, and then to the far right of the photo is a picture of a barn that's been renovated into a healing center that just got completed this summer. So there's going to be an opening this fall of the entire center. There'll be an opening both for the Hummingbird Sweat Lodge, but also the Healing Lodge. It's close to it. And they're prioritizing service to communities that are marginalized, Indigenous seniors, Indigenous disabled people, Indigenous queer and trans people who have experienced harm and oppression. And it'll be a place for renewal and healing and support. So it's a pretty exciting time at this point. And CILT has an invitation to go visit the site at some point. We'll try and make arrangements with Noah Silence to have that happen, but that will be a thrill for us to be able to do. Wanda was not able to live to this time, and it's wonderful that she had an opportunity to see this dream come true before she passed away in November. So it'll be a bittersweet event when it's launched this fall, in around the time of the anniversary of her passing. A new slide. The next slide. And this is there's a logo for the Rio and Hummingbird Healing Lodge. It's a blue and white illustration. It's a circular image with a hummingbird in the middle, in white against a blue circular background. And below that, it has Rio Hummingbird Healing Lodge as the formal name of the lodge. So that's their branding for the new site. It's pretty cool. A new slide, please. Yeah, CILT learned firsthand from our work with Wanda that building authentic, respectful relationships with Indigenous people with disabilities can be a big step in our reconciliation work. The work we did with them opened the door to cross-movement solidarity, one of the 10 disability justice principles developed by the disability collective Sins Invalid, based in the States. And through our trust building work together, Wanda became much more open to expanding her learning around disability justice as she got exposed to rallies and campaigns for livable ODSP rates and other disability rights issues. And she came to see deeper connections between both disability justice and Indigenous justice work, just as many of us at CILT increased our awareness and learning around colonization, and the profound harms it had on Indigenous people. We had many conversations at both staff events that Wanda hosted, but also public events that CILT did over the last 3 years. So we really felt very grateful to have her leadership and her generous support with our learning over the last 4 years. And we're much better for that experience. Next slide, please. Here's a quote from Wanda about just how she kind of transformed her perspective once she became a wheelchair user. I lost the use of my legs in 2019, and I discovered what disability justice is. And a part of that journey has been all of those people who were part of this organization who invited me to rallies. And what I realized is that you're all my family. And the most important thing is that I learned a lot, and I thank you for that. What I learned through all of it was that this world is not accessible in an entirety for us to go where we want to go and do what we need to do. And, you know, this is something that it's just an example of where Wanda ended up before she passed away in terms of shifting to really being more aware of disability exclusion, but also disability justice as part of the work she would be doing with Indigenous people. And I think she kind of called on us to actually embrace Indigenous justice work in the work we do in an authentic way. And that work is still ahead of us. New slide. Just 1 second, folks. And a couple things just to highlight in terms of our own decolonizing work. This past summer, CILT jump-started a new Indigenous allyship group that one of our staff, Kim Adler, approached CILT on doing, which was a great idea. And it's comprised of staff at all organizational levels, and we come together once a month to build our learning around truth and reconciliation, and also consider ways we can actually actively do this work in a more intentional way, and also do it with our partners, people we collaborate with every day. So it becomes something our sector takes up as work we have to do in allyship with Indigenous communities. I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you very much for listening. Much appreciated. Miigwech. Back to you, Dev.
Thank you. We are now at, we will now take a short break. Do you think 5 minutes is enough time, David? Okay. Let's take a 5-minute break. If you need to use the washroom, grab a snack, stretch, just take a break from your screen, please feel free. It is 1:47 now, so 5 minutes. That will be about around 1:52. So we'll see you back then.
And folks, if you need to take a longer break, if you need 10, just take care of yourself and do what you need and come back. We'll be here starting back up in 5, but you can take a bit longer if you need that for your access needs. Thank you.
Hi, welcome back. Welcome back from our break. We hope that you were able to enjoy it. We do have our ASL interpreter here. I've pinned Gregorio to interpret for today. And now we will move into our panel. So we're being joined today by Diem Lafortune and Michel Dumont. Diem Lafortune is an award-winning and multi-nominated singer-songwriter, Canada Council-supported photographer, poet, and teacher. Diem, who lives with disabilities, was born to an unmarried Cree mother and Jewish father. At 7 days old, she became a stolen child. She lived and accomplished much between months of depression. She expressed her anger and outrage at unfairness in her songwriting and wrote poems, essays, and opinion pieces, several published. She was accomplished and she hurt even more. Through music, she found a shrink who validated her. She was 43. That the healing could begin. Diem specialized in constitutional law and policy and practiced constitutional appellate law for a very short time. Her natural inclinations to consensus led to a scholarship and a certification from U Windsor as an alternative dispute resolution specialist. Diem's passion as an advocate for herself and others began over 50 years ago. A quote from Diem is, "I think I learned it when I was in Brownies. Snowy Owl was the kindest person I'd ever met. She was preaching kindness. Kindness felt good. I think I had my first crush." End quote. Currently, Diem's incredibly excited as she prepares for her first ever music residency at the Transact Club, Mama D and the Birdsong Music Project. Birdsong's mandate is supporting singer-songwriters with mental health vulnerability. Michel Dumont's art explores themes related to anti-colonialism, urban indigenous identity, and two-spirit identity. As the son of an Indian day school survivor, he deals with CPTSD as a result of intergenerational trauma. His work also honors his cultural heritage. He started at the age of 19, volunteering as an LGBT peer support line counselor and helped start the present-day Pride Central student group at Lakehead University. He became a foster parent of his second cousin in accordance with the traditions in his Métis Ojibwe family. He felt it was important to keep his son out of children's aid and thankfully had a Native child organization that started in his city. Welcome to you both, and I will continue. So,
good afternoon.
Thank you. Would you mind, can you both introduce yourself with your name, your pronouns, and a visual description?
Should I go first, Michael? Okay, my name is Diem Lafortune, also known as Mama D. She, her. I have long sort of salt and pepper hair. I'm on gray on the outside, but I haven't changed color underneath. I wear these very square glasses. I have a black t-shirt on, and I have a chain around my neck with a crucifix, an eagle feather, Star of David, and other things that are undecipherable to people who are sighted as well. So what else? Oh, I'm hot.
All right, and with that, I'll say that's cool because the breeze from Lake Superior is coming right through my windows. My furnace kicked on. It is still a really beautiful day out there, but there's a breeze, so I'm chilly. I've got a blanket right here.
You're
All right.
cutting out a little bit, Michelle.
Oh, here, how's this? Is this? Oh, see, now I have to hold my phone. Is that better?
Yes, that is. Thank you.
Okay. It's because of my lovely IKEA phone stand. It sort of like, reverberates with the microphone. Um, Hi, my name is Michel Dumont. I am, uh, oh, it says it all, what I am. I like the pronouns, he, him, because I was just raised with them, but I've become accepting of they them, and part of it's because of my two-spirit identity, right? I do a lot of work with the trans community, etc., but then I feel at home, right, with them, and so I I'm an ally, let's put it that way, right? And so I'm wearing an orange dress shirt. This is from like the first year, I think, of Truth and Reconciliation Day, when I realized I needed something orange in my wardrobe, and I could go to the secondhand store and I found this dress shirt, and I'm like, that's me. There you go. It's orange and it's a dress shirt. But since then, I've been supporting, artists and having their work on their T-shirts. Like I have my Every Child Matters T-shirt is actually from, where is it? The Ojibwe Center in near Brantford, Peterborough, that area. I went to this really cool little art gallery gift shop, and I got to see some amazing Ojibwe crafts. It was incredible. And then I read the label. I'm like, okay, they picked an Indigenous artist to make this design, and I was like, okay, sold. There you go. And then I've got color blocking in my hair and my beard. So if anybody, remembers Scar from The Lion King, that's me. I'm your uncle, right? Or Wolfman Jack to the older folks out there, right? So, hi, nice to meet everybody.
Thank you. So we'll hop right into our questions. So we know that you can't speak for all Indigenous people and communities, but how do you personally understand the legacy of colonialism, including systems like residential schools and its ongoing impacts today? And Diem, would you like to start?
Sure. Okay, I've been around a while. I just learned that I've lived longer than the life expectancy I'm supposed to have. And that's okay, because I plan to live 100 to 108 like my Cree grandfather. So I'm sort of, how has it affected me? How do I see it? How is it like sort of this presence in my life and what's around me starts with my birth. But I think one of the issues is not just the residential schools, but the well, I'm speaking as a person with disabilities, but is the child welfare system. It starts there, because something people aren't talking about is yet, and I did break this. I broke the silence in '98 with Michelle Landsberg on adoption as child trafficking. And what we're not talking about is that, and not, that has to be acknowledged. It's still going on. I'm going to guesstimate there's at least 30 infants a day in Canada somewhere being taken into the children's abduction societies. They call them the children's aid societies. I think in the attack upon women through colonization, because women are the center of the family, we're gift economies where need is provided for, and our societies were not hierarchical. Western society is very hierarchical, and the attack on our families through the attack on our women has been an incredible legacy of grief and pain and brokenness. So I've personally experienced those things. I don't know many Indigenous people who haven't. But we're into a generation now. We talk about 7 generations. So in the middle of the 7 generations, if you put yourself, you'll be able to see ahead 4 generations and you, or yourself and 3, and younger than you. And we're at a point now where that seventh generation is coming into fresh and healed spaces. The lateral violence and lateral microaggressions are slowing down. They're stopping. People are getting it. So the legacy of colonialism is to try to destroy the structures of our social organizations, which is based in kin and clan and its family. We don't give our power, and this is something, we don't give our power to somebody we don't know every 5 years by ticking a box. And that's something that my understanding as an anthropologist as well of our social organizations are central to non-Indigenous organizations, community organizing from the grassroots, because we're grassroots. So that's all I'm going to say for now. Is that what you're thinking about there, Dev?
Yeah, I didn't really have any expectation for your answer, so I appreciate everything that you shared. Michelle, would you like to share how you personally understand the legacy of colonialism?
So Dam, thanks a lot. You said a lot there. I mean, the reason why I raised my second cousin as my son was so he could have that connection to his mother and his sisters, right? Like the fact that the legacy of trauma from Indian day schools and residential schools, and with my cousin, um, she has multiple disabilities, and uh, her child was really light skinned. It would have been adopted, it would have been adopted out, and he would not have known his mother and his sisters. And so the fact that we finally had a native childcare agency, and that had been like the last time I had to apply for, to prove that I was Indian, be, because I had to like have his file transferred from Children's Aid to Delico. And then with lateral violence, I was called out a couple of years ago, for being light skinned and having this lovely French name. Um, and the thing is, the last time I had to prove that I was Indigenous was, really having my son taken from one, like the legacy of Children's Aid in Ontario, is really frightening. And then, when you have the governments, in our families, that legacy, I knew I had to do it. And the thing is, my Ojibwe Métis grandmother, she was adopted by cousins too. And the term we used in our family was that she was born on the wrong side of the shed. What does that mean? I think it could be that, well, what I think it might piss off some of my relatives because the real story and then what actually happened. But genetically, I'm related to a lot of Hardys, back home, and so it's like, okay, maybe there's a Hardy in the tree, in the family tree I don't know about. But anyways, the thing is, yeah, keeping him within the family was important. The fact that they acknowledged that a two-spirited second cousin could still have familiar ties to accomplish that. The Native Children's Organization understood that, and that so I mean, the emphasis of keeping children back within the larger family, if they possibly can, was important. Um, but colonial systems, I have a background here. My mother is right beside me on this side, right here, in this classroom photo of her 1955 classroom photo, or 1956, of the Indian Day School, Lake Nipigon Indian Day School. And as a child, I looked at her classroom photo and I would ask, well, why is their hair cut short? Why is everybody's hair short? And she would say, oh, that was the style. And then, in the 70s, I was looking at, my classroom photos, and I would say, well, why are the children not smiling. And my mother would make excuses and say, oh, well, you weren't allowed to smile for the camera. Well, we know that's not the case. We now know that these school systems were set up to kill the Indian and the child, and we can't lose sight of that. I speak really well English, really good English, because my mother, when she heard us speak with an Ojibwe accent, because she was our first, she was teaching us language. So we sounded like her. She would beat us to sound English, to speak English correctly, phonetically correctly, which is why I can do it. But it was this legacy of the school system that, taught her to hate herself. And so having to learn that, growing up, my awareness of what this colonial system was is only gained through time. And when you first gave me these questions, I saw a very academic sort of, presentation, and I realized that my strengths are speaking emotionally honest and speaking plain spokenly. And part of it, I fought very hard to be able to speak emotionally honest with strangers. And part of it was getting sober when I was 29. For so like 27 years now, I've been, going to AA meetings across the country, and being emotionally honest with strangers. And I think I put that in my artwork. As you can see, this is a mosaic, and I use the art form of kintsugi to take my mother's classroom photo and break the image while I called out the names of each child in those classrooms. And to try to show something beautiful in the broken, that they try to transmit culture as much as they could. And so, I grew up learning about my grandmother, would tell me stories about Nana Bajou, and would tell me, stories about, Gitchigami and Labrador tea, and we would walk in the bush, and learning to label the plants and their medicinal, uses. That was my childhood, and I think that's why I identify with her so much, because she was our next door neighbor. She lived down the highway, and she used to babysit us, right? And so I have that connection to my Nokmis or my Kokum, right? And I'm rather fortunate for it. I think it's one of the reasons why I've been resilient, even when I have to deal with power structures, bureaucracies, when I'm dealing with city organizations, when I ask them, can they, use gentle reminders? And then I get these, emails with urgent, and with gifts of little, electric sort of exclamation marks on a yellow background flashing at me. And I'm like, I don't want to open that email. I'm like, that's not a gentle reminder. That's the antithesis of it, right? And then when we were talking about, sacred ceremony spaces, sacred fires within the city, if you don't have a $25,000, insurance rider, you can't have a sacred fire. And for me, access to culture means, attending sacred fires for whatever, reason it may be, right? If it's to give strength to the courthouse, like the judge who was jurying Barbara Kentner's trial of her death. And that was a local woman who had a trailer hitch thrown at her. And so I went to that sacred fire. And the thing is, it was the funeral home that had the permit to have a fire on their parking lot property, that they let the community come in to, which was centrally located, to have a sacred fire for 4 or 5 days. And so sometimes it's our community allies, that will step in and help, right? And so I like seeing that. It's quite wonderful.
Thank you. And I think you both spoke a lot about how colonialism really is about the separation between the disconnection between culture, between family, between all of those connections to your own history even. Yeah. So how do you think that colonialism and intergenerational trauma disable Indigenous people and communities? And how can we as a settler organization address these impacts that continue to affect families and communities connected to the residential school system, but also other systems that have impacted Indigenous communities?
You want me to go first again? I have a very French name too. It's Michel Dumont. Okay, I think one of the big pieces, and this is a great segue from the last question and into the next question. I'm going to say something which was very disturbing when I started saying it back in 1998. I lost my culture, but more important, I lost the transmitters of my culture. Culture, we have, now this is as a critical anthropologist I'm speaking here, an Indigenous anthropologist. I was very blessed in all the losses I had. I had a photograph of my mother. It's really hard to grieve if you don't have a photograph, if you don't know who you're grieving. Because in child development, and this is way back, the first 5 months of the child, there's a bonding, not an attachment, but a bonding that goes on. And you can't replace that. And I don't think the non-Indigenous world lost those connections. I'm going to say they lost a lot of that connection hundreds of years ago. I do actually a workshop called Colonizing the Heart, and it looks at it leads people through a 2-day trip to explore, and this is significant, the political, economic, social, and historical impact things that were formative in the development of their sense of self and their grandparents' sense of self. And people that haven't lost like we've lost, or think they haven't lost like we've lost, don't have to do this work. But until they do this work and are grounded in their own stories, I think it's going to be a real problem to understand the damage we've experienced through intergenerational disconnection. I can go to the Native Center and I can participate in drumming and I can participate in all kinds of things, but that's not from my family. It's a different thing. It's like going, for me, it felt a little bit like going shopping for things. So I went back to the roots. My auntie was, may her name bless us, Beatrice Medicine, and I worked with her on the 96 Royal Commission on Aboriginal People. Her focus, she was one of the 4 academics that were Indigenous academics that were overseeing that, and I worked with her on the traditional family and adoptions like Michelle has done, the taking people traditional. I was looking at traditional adoption versus a cultural adoption, which is keeping in the family. So it's very hard, and it continues to impact generations, because if you can't grieve, that's what you're passing on. You can only pass on to your children what you have. And if you're missing things because of the damage that's been done for you, support those children, because they're the ones who are going to pick it up. And I became very unpopular for a while when I said that. I didn't lose my culture. I lost the transmitters of my culture. It was really, really scary for a lot of people because they got what I was saying. And the big one was, how do you process and move on to your life if you can't grieve? It's this splitting of that we do, love, hate, and reparation of self. As babies, little tiny babies, we hate our mother, when we aren't fed, and we love her when she's fed. As we develop a sense of self separate from our mothers, that disjointedness comes together. It's reparation. How do we do that when we don't know who that is? How deep is that? And how many generations will that absence of connection affect? We don't know. But we should be looking into it. I'm sure if adoption records were completely open to us, we could do that work. But the damage is so deep that the government doesn't even want those records open, because they don't want us to say, you see, they would rather hide the evidence and keep the records closed than know the truth about the practices they're carrying on. And not just with us. I was in some ways fortunate. I didn't look like the people that adopted me. I knew I was different. And I took on what I did. I took on Frantz Fanon's. He said, I'm an orphan. I must understand everything because I belong nowhere. And I've taken that and I've said, well, knowing that, I'm going to figure out how I can belong anywhere. And that was my healing. And that was through healing. And that's another piece, is the resources aren't there for the one-on-one healing that needs to happen. I had to go to a grief specialist and do body work. I had a Quaker couple, 2 retired doctors who worked with mostly Indigenous people. They were psychiatrists up in Penetanguishene. They started the alternative violence program. And when they met me, I was a breath of fresh air, a hurricane, they said, but still fresh air. They went up to Penetanguishene the next time they went up, and they inquired, and everybody that was in Penetanguishene that was in for rage, unprocessed grief related homicide were adopted people. But they don't want to open the records and see that this is how they're breaking people. This is the kind of breakage that happens to people. It makes us vulnerable to be taken into toxic things. Toxic. And so we're still struggling. We have gang issues on reserves. We have all this kind of stuff. And this is the legacy of the deliberate breaking and the deliberate soul wounds that were done to us.
Thank you. Michelle, how do you understand how colonialism and intergenerational trauma disable Indigenous people and communities, and how might we as settler organizations address those impacts?
Ooh, with an open heart and an open mind. That's kind of what it gets down to, right? I mean, we are taught, in a Western idea of thinking, just to sort of ignore and, persevere and get over and just, put it in the past. And all my life, I was, told that I had to do all of those things. I also had to, like, not say I was gay, not say I was Indian, not say so many things just to appease, the prevailing, paradigm, like the prevailing, thought. And what it comes down to, when we initially had this conversation, Dev, and you asked these question about the rates of indigeneity and disability, I could have intuited that. I did not process that or internalized it. Like, I didn't really understand. I set me on a Google search, and my whole life, dealing with intergenerational trauma and how it manifested in my household. My mother was a very abusive parent. Um, and I mean, the beatings that we got, she learned at school. And so that sent me on a journey of health. I mean, it's one of the reasons why I got sober when I was 29. I had to start dealing with, not just blaming her, but trying to understand her. And it's through my artwork that I've been able to forgive my mother, especially in this artwork where, she's right beside my ear here. I can see her as a child, and I can see, that the system did not do her any favors. And learning more, as many Canadians, when I first learned about, residential schools, I just thought, oh well, my mom was in Indian day school, so that was different. And then it was an Indigenous reporter, Martha Troyan from Winnipeg, who said, well, Michelle, did your grandmother or your mother go to residential school? And I said, no, I know my mother went to Indian day school. And she said, well, they utilize the same processes of assimilation and abuse that were in residential schools. And once I started on that journey of understanding that, I started to be able to forgive my mother. But the abuse that was fostered onto my sister and I, was the Ontario Victims of Crime. They said that my sister and I survived one of the worst cases of childhood abuse in Ontario legal history. That's, sobering. Uh, and so oh, like I could go on about, how the school systems, fail our children every day. I can, point criticism at, um, the mental health, you know, uh, community for not necessarily understanding uh, intersectionality, right? And the thing is, I've spent a lifetime understanding what those intersections and how they interact with, the the legacy of the school system, and it's Western thought in general, right? I mean, what we were taught how to behave at home or how we behaved at home was so different than how we were taught how we had to behave at school. And so I learned some of the most caring, wonderful things at home amidst so much, violence and abuse, and trying to, factor what were the healthy parts of, my being raised in my culture versus the negative stuff. And then learning, where that negative stuff came from, right? It was incredibly eye opening. And if I can do anything, thank you for allowing me to share. And I don't want to trigger people, and I know I have that capacity to trigger people when we talk about certain subjects. Even in my extended family, they think that it's like, what am I doing? Like I should not be speaking ill, and I'm not. I'm trying just to understand, where things how things happened, how things came to pass, and try not to create those same mistakes in my generation, right? Which is why I kept my son within the family. It was important that the things that were done well culturally, and and then take those things and walk the talk, right? And so I've spent my life doing that, trying to be a happy out gay man, right? Learning about two spiritness. I remember the first time I heard about what being a two spirit was Tony Nobis. He was a local HIV educator, and from my mother's reserve, well, close by. He went to the conference in Winnipeg where they termed the term two spirit, and when he came back that summer, he was like, or fall or whatever it was, he's like, oh, Michelle, you're two spirited. And I'm like, oh my god, yes, because I had a male and female internal dialogue, and I'm like, oh, I'm not crazy. Like that's why I went through, take abnormal psychology, and I took psychology in university to try to understand my family, try to understand myself, and then to find out that I was just normal. And it was like, oh, that was a burden lifted off. And to be able to express your indigenous heritage or reclaim it, is also a bloody wonderful thing. Like allies have made my life much better. And I have to thank you profoundly for choosing me to come here, because now I've learned about Wanda, and I've learned about Diem. I'm meeting all these wonderful people, and it's going to make me cry because, there are times when it's nice to be reminded that there are wonderful people in the world.
something, and I don't want to appear naive. I work with Paula Allen, and may her name bless us. She was she used the term in 1989 in her book Spider Woman's Granddaughters. She put the term, and this is, we had a huge debate. Walter Williams, Barbara Mann, myself, Paula Allen, old school, B medicine. We had a huge debate around using the word two-spirited because we were using it in quotation marks, right? Because every culture has their own. And a lot of people don't know that. And I think as a disruptive force of empowerment, that we should always tell the story about two-spirit being something we decided to use when it's not completely accurate, but to tell that history so people understand how, again, we've had to adapt in a way so that we have a sort of a universal understanding rather than a cultural specific understanding. I was a co-founder of the Two-Spirited People of the First Nations of Toronto and the National Native AIDS Awareness. And it was really hard. It was really hard because I was already not completely accepted because of my faulty origins. And then I'm queer, and I distinguish between queer and LGBT. And I think Indigenous two-spiritedness is queerer than LGBT rights oriented because we're into transforming society. Rights may be a way of doing it, but it's not the end all and be all, and that's really important. It's not reactionary, it's transformational. And it was really hard to do the AIDS awareness and that. I'm talking almost 40 years ago, if my math is right.
Thank you both. I'm just looking at our time. Trying to decide if we have time to do one more question before we move into opening it up to Q&A. David, did you have a opinion?
If we can give a time frame, because I realize we have a half an hour left, right?
Yes.
We wanted to have a good 25-minute Q&A possibly, so.
Yes.
We don't have any questions in the Q&A right now, so maybe one more question with the timeline as David recommends.
We did have some questions come in through our registration form. I'm trying to figure out which is these last couple of questions we had were kind of very large questions.
The trust building one. I like the trust building one.
Okay, great. So we recognize that settler, so-called Canada, has long histories of violating trust and continues to do so through ongoing colonial policies, broken treaties, stolen land for settler monetary gain, and discriminatory attitudes. CILT is interested in taking steps to begin relationships so that disabled Indigenous people feel that they are a central part of our community, which we acknowledge needs to change. What advice can you offer us and other organizations across the disability sector in doing this work in a way that fosters trust building? How do we engage in decolonization and authentic relationship building with Indigenous communities without falling into tokenization? And whoever feels they would like to go first can go first. I know it's a big...
We'll just stare looking at each other being so empathetic, right, Michelle? I like this question. And I like this question because I do this workshop, decolonizingtheheart.org. Okay, I'm going to leave that there. I've always been a firm believer that we're not going to have any kind of reconciliation or build relationship until people with power that are non-Indigenous and Indigenous, I mean, reconcile with their own histories and understand where their own triggers are coming from, and understand why they're not able to hear these things without getting defensive. And they've got to do that work, and at the same time, just expecting people to like, oh, we're going to work together. You got to build relationships, really build relationships with people who've done their work. And I'm doing something with my church right now. I'm trying to get them to do it. Is to host a really super nice dinner, not a potluck in the sense of you have to provide, but we're going to host like a 5-course sit down fancy dinner, you know, roast broiled salmon, the whole business, and invite Indigenous people, leaders, people we know, to come and to start building relationships. And one of the big things is you may not, it's going to take years, but it's doing that, reconciling with your own history, and then having environments where people can socialize and get to know each other personally. Then you can start doing the work, because you got an investment in it. You have a new friend and you get it. And that's it's like I said, that's what a lot of the work around decolonizing. Victoria Freeman does some fabulous work about understanding your own history, so you understand what your own triggers are and why you have limited ability to be empathetic or compassionate and resist the truth of what happened to us. And that's enough for me.
Thanks for that. I also thought about this question as well, and I think, you know, Sheila Rogers dropped a list of books that it was recommended reading, and for people who really want to learn, I posted them in the Q&A section, so hopefully someone can copy and paste and put it wherever other people can see it. So Sheila, I was talking about some apprehension about doing this panel, and Sheila Rogers reached out to me after I shared her post, and you thanked me, and she said has never met me, but she, you know, is grateful for, you know, my art practice, to that effect. But realistically speaking, you know, education, you know, having to speak about something that we spent years trying not to speak about, right? I try not to dwell in the dark places in my life, but there are times when I have to talk about the trauma in my family and how it manifested intergenerationally. And so there's this reluctance to want to talk about this, but then we know we have to, right? And so this year, in the last couple of years, I saw something really horrendous, and it was like a hashtag no bones. And so those are like, you know, the deniers that this actually happened. And it's another example of why we need to forge these allyships with indigenous communities. So there can't be this denialism that's just so prevalent south of the border, because it's happening up here as well, which, you know, is just so abhorrent. But then here we are, you know, shedding light onto our realities and our hopes and our dreams, and it's through wonderful people like you that make, you know, it's not performative. This is actually doing the work, reaching out to lived experience and lived people, like to actually, you know, there's no discussion without us, right? And so you're including us, which is really wonderful. But thank you, Miigwech.
And we're so grateful that you were both able to join us today and participate in these conversations. I'm going to really quickly do our thank yous and wrap ups, but we will be moving into the Q&A. This is just so that we have it at the end of our recording, because we will stop recording as we move into the Q&A in case folks want to ask questions that are a bit more, they would like to ask a little bit more, not to the general public. So I will just do that really quickly. So thank you to our event panelists, consumers, coalition, and community partners, allies, and CILT staff for marking truth and reconciliation with us today. Thank you also to our ASL interpreters, our cart captionists, and I forgot to put this on the slide, also our note taker for your access supports. I also like to remind everyone that you will be receiving a follow-up email from us with a copy of the slides and the notes taken today. We will also share a list of resources and a feedback form that we ask that you fill out. A recording will also be available on our YouTube channel over the next week or so. I also want to thank Joella Knott, Robin Simmons, Kim Adlard, and David Myers for helping put this event together. And yeah, can we also pause the recording before we begin our Q&A?